Good afternoon and welcome to a live edition of the Deep Look podcast. We are here in Mason, Ohio. Championship field straight behind us. We are about 45 minutes away from the start of the men's championship game. Charlie Eisenhood and Keith Raynor with you alongside UMass coach Dylan Tennell. Dylan, UMass coming through with a big win yesterday over Cal Poly SLO, 15-10. Congrats on that. How you feeling 45 minutes out here?
I feel great. It's been a really fun weekend for us so far. The Cal Poly game, I felt like we had gotten out some of our jitters from early in their day that we had against Texas, and we had a real nail-biter of a game against them, and felt like we were a little more ourselves in that semifinal, and I'm hoping for the same today. I feel the guys are in a good place. They seem confident and healthy and ready to have a good time.
It seemed like the team executed on this big stage where they haven't really been before fairly well, while your opponent seemed like they maybe felt a little bit of nerves in that semifinal. How is the team feeling, and how did you prepare to play in this stadium environment and a different kind of feel than usual?
Well, you see, we had the secret that we always practice in a stadium. We actually get to practice in the UMass football stadium, which is kind of wild coming from a college where, like, the football stadium is sort of like sacred ground, Georgia. Yeah, we practice every night in the UMass football stadium, so we're used to playing in a stadium. We're used to kind of the feel of that turf and just the way that wind can be a little weird. And so they, honestly, a lot of my players said they felt more at home playing out here than they did on the grass fields that we were having the rest of the tournament on. So we get to do it again today.
It's been an interesting season for UMass, so strong to start. You win Smoky Mountain Invite over this UNC team that you're going to see in the final. And then dealing with some injuries late in the season. Don't win at the New England Regional, but then you've looked so strong here. What's been the kind of the difference to kind of resurge back into nationals and get yourself into this title game?
Well, regionals was exciting because obviously we went into the game in the finals against Brown, like playing that game to do as well as we could and hoping to win it. We had they played great down the stretch and ended up pulling that one out in a super close one. And I think it was a moment where the team could have been pretty discouraged and kind of fallen into some mental traps, but instead they sort of like rebounded and put together a really good game against Vermont, and actually felt like it was a situation where we got another really close good game under our belt, and I think it built back some of their confidence. And just kind of have been enjoying the gift of having these extra few weeks to get to play Frisbee together that I know a lot of other teams would really be excited to have. So we try not to take that for granted and try to make the most out of it that we can.
Obviously, this is a North Carolina team that you've seen before that you're going to play, and let's talk a little bit about this game that's about to happen. When you look at North Carolina, what kind of things are you seeing that you need to prepare your team for? What are their strengths that you have to try and take away?
I think that their strength is that they're extremely well balanced. They are good at everything. I feel like they're not a team that you can look at and pick out a particular weakness and say, oh, here's something we can exploit. Like, they're good across the board. They have great depth. I think they're one of the only teams in the country that can match up with us depth-wise. They got great disco. They got good athletes. So it's really just a matter of kind of like trying to force them out of their comfort zone a little bit and trying not to make mistakes. And if you do those things, then you hope it works out for you. But it's going to be a good game. I think we match up well with them, as in like evenly. Like I think that their matchups for us are good as well. But definitely exciting game.
Well, we're looking forward to it. We know you need to get over to your team and get all set and ready to go. So we'll let you go, and good luck out there.
All right, thanks guys. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Dylan Tennell with us here as we get set for Championship Monday. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Keith, as we get some more guests on their way over here, just initial thoughts on what we saw yesterday in semifinals, and I actually want to turn our attention to the women's division for a second. We see the top two seeds coming through, UNC and Colorado, getting a rematch of last year's final. It didn't seem like we saw the best of Colorado at any point until against UBC yesterday evening, and they just looked fantastic.
They really did, and I think we just talked to Dylan a little bit about the experience of playing in this environment in this stadium, and I think it's not just being on the field and playing in front of a crowd with the crowds in the stands and there's the TV cameras and the TV timeouts. I don't think it's just that. I think it's the prep too. What do you do between quarterfinals and semifinals? How much of that time do you take resting? When do you start warm-ups? What's your routine look like? When are you eating? How much are you eating? All those kinds of things, you get those reps earlier. And I think you saw that shine through yesterday for the teams that have been there in the women's division. UNC and Colorado are teams that have seen these situations before. Vermont and UBC, it was unfamiliar territory for them, and both Vermont and UBC looked pretty nervous in the early portions of that game, and I think that only compounded as they saw how prepared their opponents were and how comfortable they were in those environments.
Yeah, and on the other side, UNC has just looked completely dominant start to finish at this tournament. They win last year's final by 1 goal over Colorado. Is there a recipe for quandary here that you see, or is this UNC Pleiades team just too strong, too much continuity?
I do, but I will say that based on what we saw yesterday, I've been somewhat critical in the lightest of ways. I mean, we're picking nits when we're talking about weaknesses for UNC, but I do feel like their O-line has not been this model of perfection or this clean unit. They play great defense after the turn, so they can afford to be a little sloppy, but you would expect with their offensive acumen, with the resumes, that team may go out there and complete every pass for games at a time. Well, guess what? They did basically in the semis. Not a single offensive turnover for them in the semis. And I think if that North Carolina shows up, it might not matter how good Colorado plays. I don't know if they could beat that UNC. So partially, I think they have to hope that version of UNC is just not there again. If they get anything less than the best UNC, Colorado's athletic enough and experienced enough, I think, to get a game on them. But I don't know. If both teams have their A+ game, I don't know how Colorado beats UNC.
Well, we have somebody we can ask about that as we welcome in Danny Proby, head coach of UBC. Hello. And also co-host of the Huck and A podcast.
Gotta rep the brand.
I see. You have nicer gear than any Ultiworld gear that we own, but we have the Ultiworld on the sleeve.
I know, it's cute.
Danny, a wild environment last night for the semi. Obviously, I know you must be disappointed to come away losing that game, but what did you think of Colorado and what we might see today?
Yeah, I think we've watched all of their games, and I think that what we saw yesterday, they were playing at a different speed than I think that they were playing the rest of the season. Like, their entire offense looked a lot crisper and a lot faster. Like, they were playing more like stall 2 ultimate than we'd been seeing a lot of kind of forced throws in a lot of their other games. I think that they did have quite a few turns, so if UNC is able to kind of just play their small ball and outpatient them, I think that they're going to potentially do what UNC does and win championships, but yeah.
I feel like your team is a pretty athletic team. You're able to outrun and outjump a lot of teams that you come across. Did you feel like Colorado maybe had an edge in that category, and that could be something they could lean on against UNC?
We personally tried to play Colorado's game, and we don't play that way. We actually typically play a little bit more like UNC, and so I think that we kind of got sucked into that a little bit. So Colorado is ready for those big matchups that UNC can throw down. Like, I think that Flail on Dawn could be a very exciting thing to watch, and yeah, I think that they're definitely more prepared than we were.
I heard your interview at halftime yesterday during the game. And you talked about just how difficult it is to prepare for the environment that you play in. We play the whole weekend on grass fields and kind of a normal ultimate tournament vibe. And then we come over here to the stadium. Everything's a little more removed. It's a loud crowd. Evening game on fast turf. Was that, you feel like, the most difficult adjustment for your team? Yeah,
I guess it was challenging for us because our team kind of gave us no indications that they were feeling scared. Our warm-up looked good. When I was checking in with all their faces, they're all smiling, looked like loose and relaxed. And so it kind of came to a surprise to us when we were just not able to convert. And when we've been talking about it nonstop since it happened, and we've been talking about different things. And a lot of people said that they actually just couldn't see their players, because I was bringing our O-line off after, and I was like, did you not see this person right in front of you? Like, they were open or whatever. And they're like, I didn't see them. They said all they could see was like white jerseys. And I don't know how not valid that is, but like how much that actually plays into a fact, or if because of the pressure, because the environment, people were very like tunneled and didn't have like a wide focus. I think people were very narrow focused and had a hard time kind of like seeing the whole field, and that included our own players.
I will say, I actually commented. I was sitting over here in the media tent looking out on the field once the sun really went down.
Yeah.
It was not a particularly well lit, bright.
It was really hard.
Field.
no excuses. Absolutely no excuses. We were dropping the Frisbee, we were throwing into the ground. So there's a lot of things, but I don't think that super helped bring the level of anxiety down. But I think a couple of our players played in that WUC showcase game. Like a couple of them were on traffic. And so we had played with a stadium, and I think that those players played well. And the players from Red Flag, I thought, also played well, who had played in kind of a championship level game. But our other players, I think, really struggled. And if we get more opportunities, I think we're going to be way better equipped next time.
All right, so going into this final, Charlie has set the line at North Carolina -2.5. So they're going to win by 3 or more goals. What do you think? Do you think Colorado can keep it close, or do you think we might see a UNC blowout?
I mean, I think I was expecting a blowout last year, and Colorado, I think they have players that know how to clutch up now, especially after Molly Brown's season last year. So I still would take UNC to win, but I think it's going to be tighter than that spread.
Taking Colorado +2.5. So I guess I want to ask you, what does Colorado need to do to try to rattle this UNC O-line? The UNC offense did not turn it over in the semifinal, and they have basically been uncontested throughout the entire season. So is there something that you think that, strategically Colorado needs to try to do, or is it just win your matchups?
Yeah, I think that UNC plays really nice small ball, technical, moving the disc quickly, and that doesn't necessarily play into Colorado's defensive style. They want to see discs being put up and letting their athletic players, their tall players, kind of come down with it. So, I mean, Stacey Gaskell is kind of a threat in the end zone regardless, whether it's on offense or defense, and so yeah, I guess a little bit more of like flash poaching and those kinds of things might spook UNC a little bit more. I'm not sure if Vermont was doing that enough, or if they were just trying to play them as honest as possible, but they might have to experiment a little bit on the defensive side.
Well, now that you've seen this stadium, I mean, you were a new coaching staff with UBC. You mentioned that you had some players who kind of had this experience prior, but others who hadn't. How much do you think this is going to benefit the team moving forward into next season?
Yeah, I think whole new coaching staff, whole new offensive and defensive systems, and we got everybody all the way up until kind of quarters, played basically evenly throughout the season, and we had 2 kind of different defensive type of lines. I think the rookies on our team have developed so much. They saw the field last night as well and played great. So I think next year I feel really confident that we can all draw on this experience, and as like gut-wrenching as it's been the last 16 hours has been extremely difficult for our team. I think it's going to pay off in the long run. All those things that hurt the most are the most motivating.
Well, we will certainly see you back here next year.
Definitely.
And it's going to be a lot of fun, so we'll let you go. Thank you so much for your insight, and congrats on making semifinals.
Yeah, thank you. See you next year.
All right. Danny Proby with us here on Deep Look. Keith, any final thoughts on this women's matchup before we turn our attention to the men's game that's coming up in just a few minutes?
I mean, after last year, it's dripping with narrative drama. Right? We talked about how we didn't necessarily always get these Clash of Titans, these Destiny matchups, that some of those really haven't played out. Well, here we are. I even made my bold prediction when we did our bold predictions show back with Lindsay Sue at the beginning of the year that we would get a number of preseason 1 versus 2s in the final. And we're getting that in the women's division. I mean, these are the 2 teams that were targeted at the beginning of the year. This was always supposed to be the challenger to UNC. And while Colorado probably wouldn't talk too much about that, I do think they'd admit, yeah, we've been thinking about that UNC game for 365 days. And we are now in the position to change our fate. We get to rewrite that story. And Stacey Gaskell, when we had her for the press conference yesterday, said it isn't about revenge. It's about proving that we can do this. And I think that this is going to be a highly motivated team. And does UNC have that same fire? You've got back-to-back titles. I wouldn't say they're resting on their laurels, but they may not feel like they have quite as much to prove as Colorado. And if you want to grab onto something, that could be the difference if Colorado's going to be the team that comes out and has the stronger, more energetic performance.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking hunger factor. I think obviously Colorado's got the edge there. But I think when you look at the talent, the continuity, the depth of the teams, UNC has a slight edge in all those areas. Their offense has been that good.
Don't forget about mullet factor. That's a big one.
Well, the mullet factor, in fact, we've seen a lot of mullets out here.
Mullets are in right now,
Cody Mills,
apparently.
head coach of Cal Poly SLO, joining us. I know your team knows a little bit about some mullets.
Yeah, mullets are the new mustache. Mullets for Mason.
Well, I'll get your pick on this too. Keith, I'll start with you. Straight up, who you taking, UNC or Colorado?
I'm taking UNC. I don't think it's a particularly bold pick, but they just have had the seasoning, and we've seen them do this before, and I think they've had the advantage of the matchup.
Cody?
I think UNC also, but it's a very weakly held opinion. I think UMass is a team that when they're hitting is pretty difficult to stop.
We're talking about the women's game.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard
That's
you
all
say.
right.
Understandable that you're confused.
Over my shoulder and saw UNC over there.
We got a lot of UNC
Easy to
in
get
the
confused
finals.
about which UNCs we're talking about.
My mistake. Yeah, too much UNC. In the women's final, though, I'm also going to take UNC. So, not much of a change. Yeah, they looked really solid all weekend. And though I don't think they've played a close game yet, I was a little more absorbed in the men's side of the bracket scores. I think they got pushed a little by Superfly in the semis, and I'm sure they had a tight game with Ruckus early on. I think it ended up further apart, so maybe they've checked the box on we've played a tight game, and after that, no more holes.
I'm also going to take UNC. At the end of the day, I just think this is the most talented team top to bottom, and the amount of, they've had multiple O-liners on the offense for 3 or even 4 years at this point. I just don't see how Colorado is going to be able to get it done, but
so either
we almost did it last year, Keith.
Either we're going to look smart or we're going to be in the Colorado highlight reel, one way or the other.
That's right. All right, well, Cody, thanks for joining us. Cal Poly SLO back to semis, and a tough game against UMass yesterday. You look so good in the quarterfinals against Oregon. What happened in this UMass game, and your defense maybe not quite able to get the same traction that we saw against Oregon?
Yeah, I think obviously I have to start with a lot of credit to UMass. That's a really good team and a lot of throwing talent top to bottom. They put it on display yesterday. Looking back from our side, probably gave them a few more mistakes, mental mistakes that we weren't making earlier in the bracket, and they were really capable of punishing them. Defensively, we knew they were going to be hard to stop, moving the disc side to side so quickly and challenging us to be aware in the handler set, orbit downfield, and we knew that they were going to shoot deep. Maybe not shoot deep quite that well, but they were able to hold effectively when we were playing one direction defense, which is not necessarily a thing that most teams at this tournament were able to do. And like you said, even when we changed the looks up a little bit, struggled to get some traction, they stayed patient and stayed disciplined. I do think we were able to generate enough turns to keep the game close had we been executing more efficiently on D-line offense. But again, good pressure from them, maybe a little bit of the moment for us, and lost our organization and discipline at points. And in a game like that, the margins are so thin, you have to capitalize on the opportunities that you get.
We had UMass coach Dylan Tennell on the show prior to your arrival, and he talked about how UNC might be the only team that really he felt like could match UMass's depth. And Judas played every player on their roster that is available in that semifinal. How much do you feel like UMass's depth makes them difficult to match up with and to plan for?
When I think about depth for UMass, that's a cool stat that they played their entire roster. But the thing that stands out to me is 1 through 7 throwing depth on any particular line. And if they can do that 24 players deep, that's even better. But it's really, really difficult to match up with a team with 7 comfortable throwers who can break the mark, throw a cheeky thing. There wasn't much wind yesterday, but even you can think of certain points where we had them pinned on the sideline for 4 or 5 straight throws, and at stall 6 they would break the mark, at stall 8 they would break the mark, and it would be a clean throw to a new receiver. So when you have 7 legitimate throwers who are not athletic liabilities either, you can't really funnel them into a weak point on the field.
Their defense was able to get some breaks on you early. What does their D-line do well, and can they replicate that against Darkside?
Yeah, I think 2 aspects of their D-line that are particularly outstanding. One, they play heads-up defense. They did a really good job on us of hanging off of cutters who were clearing the lanes, and as our cutters were trying to go to the clear space, their defenders would linger there for just a second, doing a good job of not being obvious about their positioning, and I think they were able to get their hands on a couple throws to the fill cutter just because they were poaching off the fill cutter. So I'd say their general level of intelligence on defense, especially downfield, is quite high. And on the turnover, I mean, anyone who watches the game can see that they can really shoot. We knew that Jonah and Wyatt were going to be really, really big deep threats, and one of our points of emphasis was to try and stop those hucks on the mark. Maybe not our best execution of that idea, but a D-line that can get the disc and then end the points on their first throw is devastating to deal with from a mental perspective, and by stretching the field, that's just more space for you to cover. So if UNC coughs up the disc, I can really see UMass converting.
That's actually, I kind of want to follow up on something that you mentioned there, just because we have the opportunity. We talk about in the when we're in the broadcast or doing the podcast or whatnot, the emotional toll of, for example, turning it over on the red zone, the other team hucks the other way and scores really quickly. How much do you feel like that sort of thing that sounds like narrative in the broadcast booth, how much does that really felt on the sideline and on the lines for the teams? Does it make a big difference?
I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as a big difference. I would put it on the same conceptual plane as a dunk in basketball. They all count as 2 points, but one of them kind of gets your team going and makes the other team feel like, oh, that looked easy. And as a player, I think on offense, if you get a turnover, you want to grind on defense and make them earn that break. And usually in that situation, 5 of the players are just like standing in the stack saying, wow, that point's over already. So I think it's a noticeable shift, but nothing that a mentally balanced team can't bounce back from. But it's lying to say you don't feel it.
All right, well, back to this matchup that we're about to see in the final, UMass and UNC. We've talked about UMass's depth. We know that there are a number of well-known names on this UNC team, but they're also deep. Are there any individuals on either side of this matchup who you would highlight as being the potential difference maker or the player who might define how this game could go?
I think I'll say the chalky answer here, but Wyatt and Luca are clearly the fulcrum players for UMass, and they leverage their depth really well. But I think the people who rise to the occasion in big moments, particularly in tight games, are often your high usage players. So I think the 2 of them will be big. UNC, when I watched them play Brown, it didn't really seem like we were warming up, so small data points here, but it seemed like they weren't generating turns very much. So on the UNC D-line, you probably look at Kevin Pignoni and other top players in their D-line, somebody to step up and be that block-generating player. We know they're clean once they get the disc, but getting it in their hands will be big. So I don't know who it's going to be, but the budding star on the UNC D-line.
All right, well, right when you sat down, you said you're going to take UNC to win this one, but a weakly held conviction. So tell us why and your thoughts on this final.
Essentially for the same reasons I mentioned. If UNC struggles to get turnovers and UMass keeps putting up quality throws, it doesn't feel very windy out here today, so I don't think they're going to get much help on the throws. I could see this being a tight game, and at that point it can go either way. UNC's offense is clearly hard to get the disc away from, so I don't see a clear path for UMass getting a lot of breaks. I could really see this ending up being, I'm sure this will be immediately turned on its head, but I could see this being a game with very few breaks and something that comes down to the last minute. It's a big moment, putting your stars in the field. Somebody has to step up and steal the game, so both teams just look very hard to dispossess.
That is basically how UNC beat Brown to a T.
Okay.
Very few breaks, very few mistakes. Big players for UNC stepping up, getting the go-ahead break late, and then they were able to hold on Universe. So we'll see if it plays out again. Keith, who you taking in this one?
Hate to say it, but I got to go UNC, and for many of the same reasons. I think when we're talking about those star players being able to step up in the big moments, UNC's guys have been there and done that. So whether you're talking about Kevin Pignoni or the D-line player, I think it sounds like you were describing, couldn't quite grab the name, Eli Freed could be that guy.
Yeah, Eli.
But even their O-line guys, if they have to cross Ben Dameron over, I think that they are ready to be those guys. And while I've been super impressed with Wyatt Kellman, who could be putting a Player of the Year kind of performance together here at the tournament, Luka Harwood, Caleb McSweeney, Jonas Stang Osborne. I don't know if we've seen those guys get pushed into that moment and asked to step up in that way. And I also think UNC probably is a little better suited for the resiliency. So if we do get into a situation where both teams are throwing haymakers or UMass is hitting on some deep shots and really gets the energy going, I think UNC is going to be better positioned to respond to that. So they can play off the back foot a little bit better than I think UMass will be able to. So if that situation plays out, that's all the more reason to think that we're going to see another Dark Side title, and they'll become even that much more a villain in the college division.
I mean, I want to point this out. Wyatt Kellman, when playing for UMass, has not lost this season. Now, he has been out, and this UMass team lost to UNC at Easterns when they had some players out. But when he was on the field at Smoky Mountain Invite, they got the win. Now, I actually had talked to head coach David Allison before that tournament. He said, we're not going to play our stacked rotations until Easterns. So hard to say exactly what to take away from that game. We're going to get a chance to talk to DA in just a little bit. So going to be a fun one. But at the end of the day, Keith, I'm also going to take UNC. I can't help it. This team is just too dominant. They have what, is it 5 U24 guys on their O-line or something?
And Dylan.
And Dylan Hawkins, the snub of the year, I think. I've had a fantastic semifinal.
Don't tell Texas that. Don't tell Texas that.
Well, Cody, thank you so much, and congrats on another run to semifinals. And we'll see you back here next year, I'm sure.
Appreciate Charlie and Keith. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. So Cody Mills with us here on a live edition of Deep
when
Look.
you get Cody here, you know what the people want to hear, which is when are you going to update FrisbeeRankings.com? Obviously, that's what our audience wants to know.
He's walking away. He's not having any of it. We need to know, Cody. So yeah, we're gonna get David Allison in just a moment, as we are now about 20 minutes out from the start of the men's final. A lot of trends here, Keith. I mean, the women's final preview, brilliant job by Bridget Meisner here reporting on the women's division, is an annotation of last year's preview. And that's how similar the storylines are as Quandary and Pleiades get set to face off.
That is, I will say, one of the areas, the change from last year to this year. I do feel like if you compared UNC and Colorado's deltas from last year to this year, I think Colorado could have an edge in that category. You're talking about the development of Emma Williamson, the reintegration of Bailey Shigley. They've added Faye Burdick, who has been more or less their ace defender alongside Khalil Phillips as a freshman. So I think that on that side, you might give Colorado really the edge. North Carolina has their own things that they could say they've gotten better at. Some of those veterans are getting better. We've seen a huge amount of growth from Erica Birdsong. She's really stepped up into becoming one of the stars of this UNC team. But that could be a potential edge if you're looking for reasons to back Colorado. If you're looking to put something on the plus money on the money line, then maybe we can talk you into it.
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about the conditions. Very light breeze, and you can see behind us it is bright and it's hot. And the turf in particular is very hot. And I think that's going to play a factor. I mean, the fatigue factor today is very much a possibility. And both teams have had a pretty decent amount of time to rest their stars, opening up their rotations. I mean, we just talked about how UMass hasn't played their whole roster yesterday.
And UMass just told us they play on a turf all the time. So between that and Colorado and UNC both having played in these finals, I think we're going to see teams be pretty smart about managing their time in the sun, their time on the turf, all the kind of little idiosyncrasies that us plebes don't know anything about. But I think that they'll be pretty good at that. I would watch for cramps and the like, but otherwise I'm hoping that'll be less of a factor. As far as the wind, as Dylan mentioned, sometimes stadiums can create kind of weird swirly wind effects. We've also seen here in Ohio, as the temperatures have been climbing in the afternoon, the wind could switch its intensity up. So we're going to be hitting that point for particularly this men's final. So do keep an eye that the wind conditions may change too.
You know, one thing that's interesting about this matchup is we look kind of at the path of these two men's teams. UNC narrowly defeating Brown in quarters, and UMass has to essentially make a late comeback against Texas, and then they both play pretty comfortable semifinals, which I think is unusual to see close, super tight quarters and then big blowout semis.
A little bit strange, but hey, for all we know, Charlie, Brown could still be the second best team in the country. Guess who won the New England region over UMass and Vermont? It's Brown, so you never know. They might have given UNC their toughest test. We don't know.
Well, Darkside coach David Allison joins us now. David, welcome. Congrats on 9 straight semifinals for UNC, 5 straight finals. That's an incredible statistic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a testament to the dedication that the team has put in and the coaching staff and the captains over the years. You know, obviously North Carolina has been building from a community standpoint for well over a decade, and we're starting to see the fruits of those labors.
Well, we were just talking about the quarterfinals being tight for both Darkside and Zoodisk.
Yeah.
Take us back to that Brown game. I mean, a game with very few mistakes, extremely close. I mean,
Yeah.
Brown is ahead by not even a break, just on serve until late in the second half. What was the difference maker down the stretch?
That's an interesting question. I think we stuck to our game plan, and it's amazing how well they executed what we were asking them to do throughout 3/4 of that game. And you start to question yourself in terms of maybe we came up with the wrong things to try. But you get to that point where you're like, do I stick with it or change? And we stuck with it, and we finally were able to squeeze 1 turnover, out of them late in the second half that allowed us to kind of take an edge and squeak that one out. I think it's really just more about how well Brown played. I mean, Leo and Jacques are world-class players. They're on the U24 team, and they're going to play club for a long time and be successful in club. And when they practice all season playing one specific way, and that chemistry and how well they execute on that, it's incredibly difficult to stop. It's just such a different style compared to most of the other collegiate ultimate teams.
Oh, well, let's move forward around to your semifinal yesterday.
Yeah.
You take on another New England team. It's just all New England. You're basically about to win the New England region if you can win this title. I don't know if they'll just confer the title to you, but so you're playing in this really tight game with an inexperienced, really excitable, energetic Vermont team, and then kind of pull away in that second half. What do you think made the difference for Darkside in helping you pull away from them?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we leaned into our depth there, right? I mean, we know that we were a deeper team. We know that they've had a harder run through the tournament. And, the goal, again, try to make them play some long points, not get too many easy ones, throw a bunch of body blows, and kind of watch them fade on this really hot turf. And I think that you saw exactly that game plan get executed.
Well, you've only lost once this season, and it came at the hands of the team you're about to play in this final, UMass, back at Smoky Mountain Invite. Going back to that game, I know that that's not necessarily the time of the year where you're absolutely stacking lines and trying to win, but
Sure.
What do you take away from that one and say, hey, these are the changes we need to make when we play against this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were familiar with Wyatt and McSweeney and even Luca, who played D-line for them, I think, last year. And, there's some chatter early in the season about Luca Harwood and how he's just been crushing things. But until you see it, until you see the timing and his ability to throw consistently deep on both sides, it's just incredibly hard to try to game plan for. And he did an outstanding job in that first game. And I don't think, honestly, we played particularly well in that game. And that cost us, that result, if you will. But it was certainly incredibly valuable to get that experience against them. And you can see, we adjusted at Easterns, and both teams were missing players at that, so it's hard to know how to take anything out of that game. But we certainly made some adjustments and made them have to do different things and saw some success there. And now we're really curious to see what this rubber match is going to look like.
We talk a lot about how Nationals is really a crucible for teams. It's a different environment, more challenging, top-level opponents game in and game out. And also, Charlie was talking about this earlier in the weekend on one of our broadcasts, but a lot of times the team that wins is the team that grows the most over the course of the tournament. What do you feel like UNC has gotten better at through this Nationals?
Offensively, I think we're playing with great tempo right now, and I think that that's been a key to our success when we're like moving the ball and getting down the field quickly, not letting it get stuck on a sideline too long. Defensively, it's just learning, when and how to apply pressure, and it's always hard to go from, the types of process-oriented tournaments that often occur at the top level in college to like now we're in execution mode, and we don't want to allow teams to get comfortable early in games. And I think we allowed Brown to do that a little bit, although they probably had a lot more to do with that than we did. In the Vermont game, I think we did a much better job, and I think that I'm hoping that we sort of turned a corner there, and we're going to be able to come out and apply that pressure really early and often against UMass today.
Well, David, thank you so much. Good luck in the final. We know you got to get over there, so we'll let you go.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. David Allison going to be leading UNC on the sidelines coming up here as we get set for the start of the game. And Keith, it's been a great tournament so far. We get the two top seeds in both divisions in the final. So maybe it feels like it's been chalk, but I feel like as we've kind of navigated this tournament, there have been surprises, and I think we've never seen a better pair of pre-quarters and quarterfinal rounds. What do you think that speaks to when we sort of think about the state of college ultimate right now?
Well, this was something that, we talked about there being a little bit of a cliff, it felt like, coming into this Nationals between contenders and pretenders feels kind of denigrating, but it's common sports parlance, I guess. But really those teams that were in the title hunt and the teams that weren't. And I think we saw that the gap between those groups might have been a little smaller than we thought, but also that group of top teams was pretty large. And so we had kind of targeted already this quarterfinals round as being something that's really thrilling. You were getting into 6, 7, 8 teams that really felt like they could beat each other, that were in title contention in some way. So then we saw that play out. I mean, we saw some really exciting rounds in the quarterfinals, and I think that extended out in the pre-quarters in a way that we didn't really expect, and that just added to the excitement. It is college ultimate, and yeah, we've seen a lot of blowouts, but these are young players who, even the most experienced ones, are still, 24, 25, and have been playing for 8 years or whatever, and most of that was high school ultimate. It's just not the same. You're going to see players make mistakes, and that's going to create exciting moments and potential comebacks, and we've seen plenty of all of that throughout this tournament.
Well, off we go into the finals. So it all comes down to this. ESPNU will have the coverage. Evan Lepler, Ian Toner, and Katie Killebrew on the call this afternoon. And, the quality we've seen from these teams, what we saw last year between Colorado and UNC in a Universe Point game, the 1-1 with UNC and UMass so far this season, these could be fantastic games, and we don't always see that in the final, Keith.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. I think that these are really strong teams that match up pretty well with each other in a lot of ways. And we've seen all 4 teams have a lot of success this season. And so I'm hoping that we're going to get some great games. And I think there's lots of reasons to believe that that's going to be the case.
I think we should both name an X-Factor player for each team. Starting with Colorado, I'm going to take Bailey Shigley.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry, it was obvious. Coming back after the injury, and they lost some players from last year, and most of their core are still intact, but she has not only returned, but she has returned playing at an incredibly high level. I mean, I've seen some people talking about how shocking it is that she's not on the U24 team, and it's hard to argue with that the way that she's played so far this weekend.
It is, and particularly we've seen her play both ways really effectively. She's a real playmaker for the team. She's able to generate blocks when she's playing on defense. She's a very brazen thrower on offense, which I think their offense benefits from given their athleticism. So I definitely think she's someone to keep an eye on for Colorado. I'm struggling. There's 2 players that come to mind for me for Colorado outside of, obviously it'd be really easy to say Stacey Gaskill or Cliff Phillips. And I do think Cliff Phillips is going to be in some of their most difficult matchups today, and that definitely could be a part of it. But I do want to look at Faye Burdick, the rookie, because she has been taking on some of those tough matchups. I do think we're going to see her matching up with some of the top players on UNC, whether they decide to put her on Alex Barnett or Ella Youngst. I think that Burdick's role is going to be a really challenging one today, and if she's playing well, that could be a difference maker for Colorado.
How about for UNC, Keith?
Looking at UNC, I mean, I'm going to stick with the player I mentioned earlier as having grown a lot, Erica Birdsong. I mean, we know what the Stars are going to do. Like, they're going to go out there and get buckets. Like, Don Colton's going to get blocks. Like, we know that that's the case. But having that extra player who can rise to the moment is really big. And she's got this fantastic wingspan and really sticky hands, so she's able to make a lot of really tough plays. And she can convert a couple of those potential UNC turnovers into receptions, and that's a big difference maker for them too.
I mean, I think the story for me with this Pleiades team is just how good their offense has been. They have been broken very few times throughout this tournament, including not having a single turnover in semifinals. A big piece of that, Teresa Yu. She has been so good. She's under-discussed as one of the top players on this Pleiades team. And of course, you know, you talk about Youngst and Barnett and Colton, but Yu, unbelievable so far this weekend, doing the little things well and making the big plays. So that's who I look at there. Let's turn our attention over to the men's side. UMass. I mean, I think I want to just steal what DA was talking about. Luka Harwood has got to be the guy. If he has a huge game, UMass could win. And if he's missing on his deep shots, they could get blown out. I mean, they have lived and died all season based on his play. And yesterday in semis, he was unstoppable.
Well, if you're going to take Luka Harwood, the O-line shooter, let me take the D-line shooter, Jonas Stang Osborne. I think Wyatt Kelman is a fantastic player. He's going to be really crucial whichever way that they play him. They played him both ways yesterday. But Stang Osborne is the guy who takes a lot of the most difficult shots for that D-line. Also the puller. We know that pulling can come up big in these big games, so field position is crucial with that fantastic flick pull that everybody's been talking about. It looks strange, but it's very effective, so I'm going to take Stang Osborne.
Pomp and circumstance beginning here at finals. We're going to get wrapped up here. UNC, who's your player to watch?
They really don't make somebody the key player, but I'm going to say Eli Freed before you can. He is that guy who could be the takeaway maker for them. He could take possession away from players in situations where most people can't. So if Freed's out there getting blocks, if you see him with 2 or 3 blocks on the stat sheet, UNC is winning this game going away.
Dylan Hawkins has been so good. I'm going to talk about Dylan. His ability to get into the deep space and make contested catches has been one of the reasons that they have come away victorious in all of the games so far this weekend. So we're both taking UNC to win it. Men's final starting about 10 minutes approximately from right now. So we're going to send it over to ESPNU. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood signing off here on a live edition of Deep Look. Enjoy the finals, everybody.